Imagine for a moment you could have dramatically improved RAW files that have virtually no noise no matter what ISO you photograph them at, that have lens corrections applied automatically, that take care of vignetting and geometric distortions and chromatic aberrations, and even improve the sharpness of your lens. And imagine if you could get all of that awesomeness without even buying a brand new camera. And not only that, but that you can start using this on the files that you take tomorrow, but also on all the RAW files that you've taken so far in the past. You can apply this to as well and improve those RAW files. Hi, my name is Matt Suess, and I am a fine art, landscape, and nature photographer and Olympus educator up here in Bozeman, Montana, and I'd love to introduce you to one of my favorite brand new programs from DxO, and this is PureRAW, and this is a game changer. This is going to dramatically improve the quality of your RAW files, no matter what camera you're using, and really no matter what ISO you're using now too. High ISO noise is now a thing of the past. In this video, I'm going to talk about this new program, this groundbreaking program. I'll give you some workflow examples on how to use it, and I'll also even compare it to Topaz De Noise, which has been, up until this point, pretty much the standard for getting rid of noise in your photos. Now, before we get started, take a look below in the caption area. I have a link to DxO PureRAW. They currently, at the time of this recording, have a special 30% off on this software that ends on May 31st in 2021. And even if you are watching this video after that special ends, this is still a no-brainer. You're going to want to get this software. Okay, so what exactly is PureRAW? It is a brand new program, like I said, and what they did was they took some of the really killer features inside of Photolab 4 and they put them into PureRAW. And this is really for people who do not use Photolab 4 but want to take advantage of DxO's amazing noise reduction features and also their lens correction features as well. They bundled that into PureRAW, and now it doesn't matter what RAW processor you use. You can send your RAW files into PureRAW first, export them as a raw DNG file, and then bring them into Capture One Pro, Lightroom, any RAW processor that you currently use. If you do have Photolab 4, you might not need this. It depends on your workflow though. Now for me, I have both. I have Photolab 4 and I also have PureRAW. And for my workflow, that works really well because there's times that I'm processing photos in Lightroom and in Capture One Pro, and I love being able to just drop them into PureRAW as opposed to having to do this inside of Photolab 4, which you could actually do. So you could actually take your RAW files in Photolab 4, just apply the noise reduction and the lens corrections, export them as a DNG, and then bring them into Lightroom. It is a little bit easier using the standalone program PureRAW to do that though. Now, this is called PureRAW. That means it only works on RAW files. It will not work on TIFFs or JPEGs. And now let's go ahead and take a look at the program and see how this can work inside your workflow. Okay, here is the interface, really simple. We're going to talk about a couple different ways to bring photos in and out of it. Let's go ahead and go to the Finder, and this is one way that you can bring photos into it, is just find the RAW files on your Finder, select them, and then drag and drop them into the program. Now, you can see this dialog that just popped up, and this is the DxO optics modules. You only have to do this once per lens and camera combination that you have. Each time you bring in the new RAW files that DxO hasn't seen before, it's going to go and download those modules for you. So we can see that I need to download the optics module for my Olympus OMD EM10 Mark IV with the 60mm macro lens. Now DxO has something like 60,000 modules here, all different lens camera combinations. It's really good that they make it that we don't have to download all of them at once. So you're only downloading the ones that you need. You only need to do this once too. So just go ahead, click download selection, and it is downloaded, and click on save. Now that I have my RAW files in here, all we have to do is click on process photos. And we have a couple options here. So the method for RAW processing, we can do HQ, we can do prime, or deep prime. Deep prime is their best and newest technology for removing noise. So honestly, I would just always leave it at deep prime. It does a fabulous job. The format, you can switch it between JPEG and DNG. We're using PureRAW. unless you need to export these as a quick JPEG for someone, go ahead and just click and keep this on the DNG. It's going to create that raw file for you. And then you have an option on where you want to save this to. It defaults to a folder inside your original folder where your raw files are, or you can go ahead and change that and put it into any location that you want. I'm just going to have it go into the DxO folder, and I'm going to go ahead and click on Process. Okay, so I took about 1.5 minutes to do those 2 raw files. I'm using an M1 MacBook Pro. And now once it's done, you have the options. You can click on View Results, or you can export it too. Now View Results, if we click on that, we can now see the before and after of how this did. And let's go ahead and take a look at this bird here, this yellow-headed blackbird, and take a look at the before and after. And with the before on the left and the after on the right. Now, to be fair, what this preview is showing you is the actual raw file with absolutely nothing applied. You know, usually when you're seeing your raw file in Lightroom or Capture One Pro, there is a little bit of enhancement going on with noise and everything like that. So if you were to bring this raw file into Lightroom or Capture One Pro, it's going to look actually a little bit better than what we're seeing here in this preview with the before and after. But I mean, look at that. Look at what it did with the noise removal on this. And this was an image that was shot at ISO 2500. Okay, let's close this window out. And now I'll show you where those files went on my Finder. We can find them right here. Here's my original folder, and in the DxO folder, these are the DNG files now. I can also come over here and select those photos and click on Export To, and now I can bring these into any program that I want. I can bring them into Lightroom Classic, Photoshop, and you can also add other programs too. So for example, I have Capture One Pro. I can click on Select Custom Software, and I can click on Capture One Pro and click on Open, and then now this is always going to be in that menu, and so I can send these directly to Capture One Pro. You also have the option of exporting the original raw file too. So if you have this button checked, this will send the original raw file along with the new DNG, both of those into Capture One Pro or Lightroom or wherever you want to go with those photos. Now this type of workflow is really the most simplest workflow. It's, you know, if you're using Finder to organize your photos, probably not many people are using that. Most people are probably using a digital asset management like Lightroom or like Capture One Pro or even Photo Mechanic to organize their photos. But this is just a very basic way of getting your photos into PureRAW and getting them out of there. Let's go ahead now and take a look at how we can do this with Lightroom. I'm going to cancel out of here and let's go into Lightroom Classic. Let's go ahead and select those 2 photos, and then to get these into PureRAW, all I have to do is just drag and drop them right into PureRAW. And here are those 2 photos. I'll deselect these other ones that we did the processing for, and I'll go ahead and click on Process Photos. Again, using DNG, I'll have these DNG files saved in that DxO folder, and I'll click on Process. Okay, these are now in the queue to be processing, and as soon as they're done processing, I will be back and we will go into Lightroom. Okay, now that the processing is done, I'm going to click on Export To, and then I'm going to choose Lightroom Classic. And because I already have the original raw files in there, I'm not going to enable this checkbox here. So by keeping this checkbox blank, it's just going to bring in those new DNGs. And let me go ahead and click on Export. It brings open the import dialog inside of Lightroom. Those are already selected, and I'll just click on Import. And then we'll take a look over here as to exactly where they brought them in. We can see here that they put them right inside the DxO folder that I have that is inside my main folder on my external hard drive. If I want to see all my photos, let me just click on All Photographs. And now we can see them right next to each other. So here is, we're looking at the file name right along the top here. Let me go ahead and increase these thumbnail sizes just a little bit. And we can see this is the D' and this is my original. Now, all I have to do is select my original and go ahead and then click on my new DNG and go ahead and go Photo, Develop Settings, and Paste from Previous. And it's going to paste those settings. I can also click on this and I can do Command-Shift-Copy or Command-Shift-C to copy those settings. And what I'm going to do here is I don't want to have the lens corrections enabled. So this has already done lens corrections, so I don't want to have those lens corrections enabled. So let me go ahead, turn that off, and click on copy, and then select the new DNG photo and Command-Shift-V. It will paste those settings in. Let's go ahead and compare the results. Let me bring this over into the Develop module, and then what I'll do is I'll drag our D-Prime version over here on the left. Let's go ahead and zoom in on here just to take a look. Now Lightroom did do a decent job removing some of the noise, but if we go in here, I am seeing more detail, especially in the rose flower over here and in the foreground here too. It looks a little bit sharper and crisper, where this is starting to get a little watercolory. And let's go ahead and just take a look in another area over here. We'll go down, and I can still see some noise in here. I still have to do some more adjustments to the noise reduction inside of Lightroom, but again, at the expense of having the water look a little bit too watercolory. So with this type of example, the results weren't terrible with Lightroom, but definitely it was a little bit better with PureRAW. We're going to go ahead and take a look at another one, which is going to have even more of a dramatic difference between the two. And let's go ahead and go into my library, and let's grab this rodeo shot. Now this was photographed at ISO 5000 on an Olympus camera, and let's go ahead and drag that into PureRAW. And here we are again where I have to download another module. I'll click on download and click on save. I'll uncheck the two that we had already done the processing on, so it's just this one here. And I'll go ahead and click on process photos and click on process, and then we'll let this do the processing. And once we're done with this, I'm going to show you, I've also been using Topaz De Noise, and Topaz De Noise has been traditionally the industry standard for doing serious heavy-duty denoising of your images. And we're going to see if Topaz De Noise is still the king of the game when it comes to noise reduction. So this here has already finished processing. Let's go ahead now and click on Export To. Let's bring this into Lightroom Classic. And just like before, I'm going to click on Import. And we'll go over here. And I'll click on All Photographs. And here we are. Here is the imported photo. Now we can see that there is a little bit of a color difference to this. This on the right had no adjustments made at all. And I have noticed this, that the DxO, there is always just a little bit of a slight difference to the image. But what I've actually found is that it almost seems like there's a little bit more dynamic range in here too. So you have a little bit of a color and tone shift, but it seems like there's almost a little bit more dynamic range in there too. Let's go ahead and take a look at how well this did. Let's bring the original over into the Develop module, and this has nothing at all, no adjustments made at all to it. Let's go ahead and bring the PureRAW version over, and let's bring that up on top here. And right away we can see a big huge difference in the noise. And look at the face, look at all over the place here, look at the hat. Let's go bring this over here. And this is where I wanted to open up some shadows, and let's take a look at the dynamic range that we can get out of here. Now if I open up the shadows on this so that we can see people in the back there, look at all the noise that has now come up. And again, I can go down here and let's go ahead and remove some of that noise. Let's crank that up quite a bit. And maybe even give it just a little bit of sharpening too. And we'll take a look here. Okay, he's looking a little soft, looking a little watercolory. Let's do the same thing now with the D-Prime version. Let's drag that over there, and then I'll have the Photoshop version now on the left-hand side. And let's go ahead and zoom out for a second, and let's go up to the top, and let's open up the shadows on this here. And look at the shadows that I was able to bring up, and look at that, no noise at all in the background. Huge difference. Let's go here and take a look. And I still have noise in the background here, even after doing some noise reduction inside of Lightroom. But look at this, the DxO version, I have better color saturation in here as well. Look at the flesh tones on this guy over here. So this is where I was really talking about how there's almost, a little bit more dynamic range. There's better color that I'm receiving from the DxO versions, and this shows it to you right away here. And let's go ahead and also take a look at the sharpness too. So we're looking at this guy's head here, and let's go ahead over to the DxO version, and definitely some more sharpness right on his hair. You can see that clearly. Now I did also do a version in Topaz De Noise, and that is this one here. And in Topaz De Noise, I used their AI Clear, their heavy-duty noise reduction in their DeNoise software, the latest version 3.0.3. And I exported that as a DNG file. So what I did in Topaz was try and make the best file possible, exported it as a DNG, and now we have it inside here in Lightroom so we can take a look at it. Now notice how dark this DNG file is compared to the other two. Now granted, I've already made some adjustments to these, but even before I made those adjustments, that darkness wasn't there. But let's go ahead and compare these. Let's go into the Develop module. And I will bring the Topaz one, we'll put that on the right-hand side. And I will bring the DxO version on the left-hand side. Now, I did open up the shadows. Let's go ahead and increase those shadows a bit. And this is it. I am maxed out on those shadows. And if we take a look inside here, we can see that there's still a lot of noise. I wasn't able to get the shadows up as bright as I was on the DxO version. Let's go ahead and compare the two, and look at the faces, look at the skin tones, the coloring. So much more improved in the DxO version than in the Topaz version. And then just even looking at the color, I have to do a bunch of adjustments here to sort of get this even comparable to the DxO version. Maybe increase the brightness, increase the contrast a little bit. I'd have to mess around with the color too. Now here's another thing that I've noticed with the Topaz DNGs. It basically resets your color temperature. And so we can see here that my temperature and tint are all at 0. If we look at my original photo, this was at 3450 temperature, and the tint was at plus 13. But Topaz, what it's doing is it's zeroing all these out to the middle, and I don't know, I've been seeing some weird color issues going on with Topaz with their DNG files. Color issues aside, we also have more dynamic range in the DxO version than we do on the Topaz version. And let's just go back in here and take a look at sharpness as well. We can see here the face is much sharper on the DxO version on the left than it is in the Topaz version on the right. And man, look at all that noise that's already been brought up just by bringing up my shadows. I didn't have that issue at all when I brought up the shadows on the DxO version. So we can quite clearly see in this sample here, this rodeo photo, that DxO's PureRAW clearly outperformed Topaz's DeNoise by quite a bit too. Let's go ahead now and switch over to Capture One Pro and take a look at some photos inside there and talk about workflow. Now we're looking at this Milky Way photo here. This was shot on a Sony camera, full frame camera. This was shot at ISO 8000. And we're going to do that one, and let's also do another photo here too. This is another Sony photo. This was shot at ISO 20,000. Let's go ahead and select both of those photos, and then all I need to do is drag and drop that right into DxO. And here we are. We're going to download those two modules. Click on Download. And there we go. Click on Save. And let's uncheck that photo. And now here are the two photos that we need to work on. I'll click on Process Photos. Everything leaving the same here. I'll click on Process. And then once this is done processing, I'll show you how we're going to get this into Capture One Pro. Okay, here we are. We are all set. I'm going to click on Export To. And then I'm going to go down here to Capture One and select that. And again, I'm not going to click on this because I already have those raw files in there, and we'll click on Export. This is going to open up the import dialog inside of Capture One Pro. Click on Import All. And I'll just go ahead and we'll take a look at all my images now. The Prime DxO version here, the Deep Prime, this is the version over here that was just imported. We want to copy these color settings and all the settings that we did here. Now, if we zoom in here, I did do some noise reduction on this photo already inside of Capture One Pro. This was my first processing of this photo of the raw file. So we can see I went a little aggressive on that. But what I'm going to do here is zoom out And let's go ahead and copy those adjustments. We'll go over to the DxO Deep Prime version, and I'll go and let's apply those adjustments. And then I'm just going to lower my noise reduction all the way so we can see exactly what's going on here with the version between the two. And if we take a look here, there is a slight color difference. We can notice that the vignetting is gone too, but we're pretty darn close. Let's zoom in here and look at that. Did a really good job knocking down a lot of the noise in this image. If we come back to here, look at the difference. We can see a lot of color noise that was still here. This is the Capture One Pro version, and the mountain just looks terrible. Coming over here, the mountain looks a heck of a lot better. And we are still seeing a little bit of noise in the foreground. This is because we brought up the exposure, we brought up the shadows, so I can just apply just a little bit more noise reduction inside of Capture One Pro, and we have a really good image. Let's take a look inside up here at the stars and look at the difference here. Those stars are a heck of a lot clearer with less color noise than what we had in our original version inside of Capture One Pro. Now, I also did do a version with AI Clear, and this is Topaz's DeNoise software. And if I zoom in on here, we're looking at the dark version right now. We can still see a little bit of noise, not too bad. And this is what gets interesting here. Let me go ahead, and I already had those settings copied from this original version here. If I go ahead and paste those settings here, look at the color difference. Again, we're having that issue with color inside of Topaz's DeNoise software. If I go ahead and take a look here in the color, it didn't zero it out on this like it did on my Olympus file in Lightroom, but those color values are the same. 4511 on Kelvin, 7.7 on the tint. Same thing here, but look at the difference in the color. So I'm not a big, huge fan of Topaz's DNG settings that it's doing. So I have to do quite a bit of work to try and get this to the color that I originally had. But let's not worry about that. Let's just go ahead and open up our shadows even more. So let's max that out. And we can see here in my original version, that was the settings. Okay, so we maxed out that. And maybe if we increase the brightness just a little bit, let's take a look in here. Look at the noise that is coming up here. Not getting that at all in this version, and this version being from DxO. So again, some more issues with the Topaz De Noise. And I mentioned color issues with Topaz De Noise. We can see here, this is that yellow-headed blackbird. This is the original raw file, no adjustments made at all. Sometimes it just does crazy things, especially with Olympus cameras. And look at the color here. This is just the raw with no adjustments coming out of Topaz De Noise, and color is just completely different. Same thing with this Olympus image here. No adjustments have been made to that, but the color difference, again, really big. Let's go ahead and take a look at that balloon photo that was shot at ISO 20,000. Let's take a look inside here, and let me go ahead and make sure I have no noise reduction turned on inside of Capture One Pro. And we can take a look here, just looking at that, comparing it to the original, which does have some noise reduction applied, already a big difference. And I actually even have a Topaz version here too. Taking a look at that, Topaz, not too bad up here in the sky. You can still see some noise, but you can see some color noise in there too. If we go down and take a look here, let's go ahead and take a look at the crowd in the foreground. This has a lot more color, and look at there's like a bluish haze over this entire image. And again, we're looking at the Topaz version. Let me go to the DxO version. We're going to zoom out here, and I want to make just a couple quick adjustments. Let's boost up our shadows quite a bit. There we go. And what I'm going to do also is I'm going to adjust my white balance. I'm going to click on the eyedropper, and let's go ahead and pick from one of the black areas on the balloon. See if we can find a good, that looks pretty decent. There we go. So from right over here, that looks fairly decent. Might want to just adjust that color balance just a hair. And let me go ahead and lower my highlights. And so got some nice shadow detail in there, and I'm going to increase my tint just a little bit. Okay, cool. Let's go ahead and take a look at the Topaz one, and let's go ahead and increase my shadows And look at how bad it's getting now. We're seeing that purple haze throughout this image, a lot worse. Let me see if I can adjust my white balance. And there is nowhere I can click on any of the black in here to get an accurate, decent white balance. So again, something is going on here with Topaz De Noise bringing in and the DNG files that it's making the color definitely not ideal at all. Let me go back to just doing this as shot, and let's just see if I can lower my highlights a little bit just to see what we're getting in terms of detail. And let's see if I increase my warmth a little bit and lower my tint. Just trying to get it a little close. That's about it. Let's take a look here at, there's the DxO version and the Topaz version. And just looking at the crowd here, getting a little bit of noise now because we brought up those shadows, can easily adjust those in Capture One Pro. And just look at how bad that is in Topaz version. Let's go ahead and zoom out and take a look here too, just at the highlight detail. We can see here, I'm losing highlight detail in Topaz's version, and I have that in DxO's version. And if I go here to just our original RAW, and let me go ahead and open up the shadows, lower the highlights a little bit, and maybe give this some DeNoise, increase the noise. So this is what Capture One can do really quickly, but again, nothing comparing to the denoising that I'm getting from DxO. And let me go ahead and just increase some of the noise reduction inside of Capture One Pro on that file from DxO, and we have a really nice usable photo that was photographed at ISO 20,000 that we just do not get from Topaz or just even from using it inside of Capture One Pro. So we can see that DxO is just doing an amazing job on even super high ISO files. What about, I'm going to show you one last sample here. What about, can it just do really decent work and improve the sharpness on maybe a low ISO photo? I have one. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. And let's go into Lightroom. I have this all prepared. Let's go into my library, and we're going to take a look at this river otter that we have here. Now this version here is the original version, the raw version that I did some adjustments to, did some denoise, did some sharpening and all of that. This one in the red here, this came from Topaz De Noise, and the one in the middle here in green is from DxO Prime. Let's take a look at these photos, all three of them. Now we're looking at this at 100%. This is my original raw file. Looks pretty decent. This was shot at, I believe, ISO 320, so not expecting a whole lot of noise in there at all. Let's go ahead and take a look. Now this is the DxO version, and look at the sharpness difference. So let me cycle back and forth between those two. Look at those whiskers and everything. I mean, just the detail that comes out of it. And then from DeNoise, from Topaz De Noise, going back to DxO, again, a really huge difference in terms of sharpness. Now, I said that this was shot at ISO 320. Wasn't really a whole lot of noise in here to begin with, but man, once I processed that inside of DxO and moved around, let's take a look here and compare this little area here to, let me get all three of these lined up somewhat similar. So here we are. This is our original RAW that I did some denoising to and all of that. Let's go to, this is Topaz's version. And now here we are in DxO, and all that noise is gone. I have some really nice contrast. The sharpness, and look at the sharpness in here. It is just unbelievable. Let me go ahead. This is Topaz version, DxO, and back to the original. DxO, again, clear-cut winner in terms of sharpness and clarity. So as I was saying before, DxO PureRAW is definitely worth the money. Again, right now it is on sale for 30% off. It's part of their launch special. That is good through May 31st of 2021. And if you're watching this video after that, even though you're not saving 30%, you are still saving a heck of a lot of money as compared to buying a new camera and all that stuff. I mean, this software, it does an amazing job on detail, on getting rid of the noise, and you can really use this in any type of workflow that you have. So it is really a no-brainer to go ahead and get this. So go ahead, take a look down below. I have links to this so you can download a free trial if you wanted to play around with it first. And go ahead, and if you've got any questions, let me know in the comments. And again, don't forget to subscribe. And that's all for now. So thanks very much, and I hope you enjoy this software. I definitely do.